Yeah, no, you're good.
Okay. You can see me?
Yep.
Everything's good?
You're all set whenever you want to start. Yep.
Excellent. All right. Well, today we are talking about the rune Ansuz. Or Ansuz. I'm not entirely positive. Let me look up how I pronounce this. I was reading too much about it and didn't bother to look at how to pronounce it. Ansuz. There we go. Ansuz. And as usual, I will start off with the visuals for it. We've got our cards here. And this one is for signals, which makes sense because Ansuz is called the messenger rune, so that makes sense. This is my collage. And as you can see, all the wonderful things on here. Don't pay attention to the tarot cards because I didn't get them right. And then we've got one more. And this is what led me astray with the tarot cards, is I really like this image for Ansuz. You've got the Fool and the Magician together in one card. And that kind of went with me really well because I see Ansuz as a rune not only of Odin, which most people associate with, but also his blood brother Loki. And so you'd have the wizard here as Odin, and then you'd have the Fool as Loki, and you see them as kind of you see them as opposites that form one whole. I consider Loki to be Odin's shadow, in the sense of how our shadow is our negative traits that we don't like to show other people. Because Loki is most definitely that. And then of course I've got my word web, which goes really well for Ansuz. Alright, so the very first thing I would like to talk about with Ansuz is the fact that it has a few different forms depending on who you talk to. Most people see Ansuz like this, although Thorson will tell you it looks like this. And still different sources will give you stuff that looks like this, and actually all of them have historical reasoning behind them. This is what we consider the oldest form of Ansuz, but occasionally the Vikings didn't like to write things in any particular order, so they would occasionally reverse it. No big deal. And as time went on, we got the younger Futhark, as well as both the Icelandic version and the Norwegian version, as well as the Anglo-Frisian one. And the Anglo-Frisian Futhark has 33 letters. And 3 of them are for what would be considered A. So you would have this one is the original one for it, and this is the one that you see in the Elder Futhark as well as in the younger Futharks. These two are the ones that go for the Anglo-Frisian one. Now with the Anglo-Frisian one, Ansuz, as we went through history, kind of lost its N along the way and turned into Os, which is how you see it in a lot of the rune poems. For example, in the Old English rune poem, it's Os, just O-S, and this would have been the word for God or mouth. In the Old Icelandic one, it ends up being ass, A-S-S, which translated to the word God. And in the Old Norwegian, Os, with 2 S's, and that translates to estuary, which is the mouth of a river. And so the reconstructed name for it is Ansuz, which is the one that we use now, and occasionally Answer. Personally, I'm so-so on that one, but a lot of modern authors like it because it also has to do with one of the meanings of Ansuz. So when you have this idea of Ansuz going from the letter A to kind of have starting with more of an O sound, then we have to change up the runes in order to get that O sound in. So the O sound in the Anglo-Frisian starts to be looking like this. So it turns into a Futhorc with an O instead of a Futhark, like the Elder Futhark. So this takes place of this, and it's the letter O. And then this is AE, and then this is the original A sound that we originally got from this in the Elder Futhark. That's all a lot of convoluted craziness, but tonight we're just talking about these. These guys will come later. So I'm just going to put them aside, and I'm going to talk about answer tonight. There's that. Alright, so the very first thing we think of when we think of answer is Odin, but also at the same time Loki. And Odin is actually the god of song, poetry, as well as wisdom and magic. And so you see how song and poetry and words are very connected to this idea of magic. That's seen very clearly in a lot of religious structures, where either a song or the word creates the world. And so it's this idea of naming things, giving them order, then creates them in a certain way. So there's a lot of power to words. And you see that in a lot of our modern sayings about words. For example, the pen is mightier than the word is mightier than the sword. A saying that we can use our words to do our fighting for us. We don't need to get to that uncivilized level. And so with this idea of words and magic, we've got these kind of two meanings to answers. We've got this meaning of language, which is very prominent about it. It's the written language, the spoken word. It involves words and the arts associated with those words. And as you can see by all of these various sounds that came out of answers, it has a tendency to do a lot more with the vowels in a language as opposed to the consonants. And it's the vowels that carry a lot of the meaning, well, that carry a lot of the feeling and emotions to words. It's the things that are the most important to those words, to the feeling of them. And so also with that you get the idea of oral tradition, of stories, which were originally told by word of mouth, which explains why the meaning of the rune would have been the mouth, as well as the word God, because it has the God of words and a mouth, which is how you project words. And so from this idea of words and the mouth and everything, and speaking, we get the idea that Ansuz does a lot of healing, has the healing energy towards the mouth, the teeth, the tongue, the throat. It helps you work on stuttering, which I'm doing a lot of tonight. But it also has to do with the breath and breathing, because that's how we make sound, is moving air from our lungs over our vocal cords, and then augmenting that with the shape of our mouths and the way we move our tongues. And so all of these things are a part of words. And so you do have this idea of breathing. And actually, breath, or the spirit, is what Odin gave man during his creation. And also, you have the word for breathing in is the word inspiration. And so that also goes towards this idea of spiritual understanding. We talked about how this has to do with messages. And those are both messages, as in vocal messages being given out to someone, like going out and, you know, you have the messenger going and telling one person sends a messenger out to tell somebody else something. But it's also messages from the God. And so this also has a very spiritual sense to it. So it talks a lot about the idea of the shaman going on religious journeys, the idea of magic and wisdom, prophecy, clairvoyance. So the prophecy or clairvoyance is receiving messages from spirit. And then you also have this idea of the symbols and patterns, which also goes into the written word. And so then you also have the runes. The runes themselves, this is the rune. So it symbolizes them as well. And which makes a lot of sense, because Odin is actually the god that discovered the runes. He hung on the tree of the world for 9 days and 9 nights. He had sacrificed himself to himself, and this is actually a poem that you'll see in all the rune books. The rune books love to put this poem in there. And after the 9 days and 9 nights, he took the runes up screaming. So you see that in a shamanic state, in a state of meditation, he receives these runes. We also have Odin as the leader of his pantheon, so it's also a leader rune as well as sovereignty, both meaning he's also a king of his pantheon as well as the leader, so he's got this sovereignty to him. But it also has to do with this sovereignty over family as well, so it does have that feeling of family history, talking about your ancestors, as well as this idea of what a sovereign needs to do to his subjects, which is give advice and teaching. This rune is also considered the test or interview rune, which is how you would kind of gauge how a student was learning from a teacher. What else haven't I gone over yet? One of the things that goes with this idea of speaking would also be a conservation of words. It was considered a virtue to not boast or, speak overly highly of yourself, or waste words on fools. But it was, and not waste words, telling people that they're doing something dumb. Don't bother with them. It doesn't matter. So it's this idea of conservation of words. But at the same time, it's all right to be overly wordy in the case of flirtation or in courting. So there's kind of this double standard there that also goes with this same idea of it being Odin's rune as well as Loki's rune, because you've got this this upright meaning having to do with being very conservative with your words, being very like Odin. He only spoke when he needed to, but he was all about song and poetry, and he knew how to use words, and he used them to their greatest effect for good. As opposed to Loki, he would use words for trickery and to mislead. He would distort messages, as well as use runes for his, not runes, but use words for his own ends, which were usually just to mess with people. So this rune has both that connotation of being the advice of people, but also this caution to make sure that you are receiving good advice. One of the things I would like to talk about is some of the poems, because these are a little weird this week. Alright, so the Old Icelandic poem is mouth is the origin of every language, wisdom's support and counselor's consolation, and to any warrior gladness and confidence. That one's pretty self-explanatory. In the Old English, rune poems would have been kind of like a moral version of, kind of like have a moral tint to them. The next one I'm going to talk about is the Old Icelandic, and this one is a riddle. And riddles also belong to the realm of Ansuz. I didn't mention that earlier, but they are. They're called, specifically when they're with the rune poem, they're called kennings. And kennen is German for to know. So it's specifically knowledge. So there you get, and you also get the word knowledge from the word kennen. So this is supposed to be a riddle. Odin is progenitor, which means, you know, the leader or kind of like the king. And Asgard's chief and Valhalla's leader. That one's not really a riddle so much as it's kind of just saying that this is Odin's room. And then the last one, the Old Norwegian poem, is the most difficult of them. And the Old Norwegian poems always had this kind of weirdness to it that makes it difficult to understand it. Some people believe that the two lines are the first line is a kenning, or a riddle, and the second line is just something that rhymes with it. A lot of more logical runic writers will say that that's what it is, because they don't want to think about it as being magical, as opposed to some people believe that they would have been either the magical meaning or that the second line had something to do with something in the lifetime of these people, so they would have understood these as something in their daily lives. But it's not something that we could easily understand now. So for the Old Norwegian poem, it says, "Estuary is the way for most on journeys, and the scabbard is the swords." So the way I understand this one is this idea of estuary is the mouth of a river, and so that kind of has this meaning of the destination is the whole reason for a journey, or that you get to your destination at the end of your journey, and that the scabbard is the swords. So the scabbard is the end of a sword's journey, so that's the end of war. And so this has this idea of the word is mightier than the sword, and that it is using words that you can get where you want to go. At least that's my understanding of it. If anybody else has any kind of thoughts on that, feel free to add. I'm up for any suggestions. These Norwegian poems are giving me hell. And other than that, I think all I have left to talk about is some of the associations with Ansuz. Obviously, we have our deities that go with Ansuz, which are Odin and Loki. Its polarity is male. We already talked about the healing. Its number is 4. Its color is dark blue, which makes sense because that's Odin's color. That's the color that he would usually dress in. Its astrological correspondence is Gemini. And for all the Geminis out there, you know what's going on with that. For example, some of the positive characteristics of the Gemini are mental agility. They are intellectual, rational, academic, interested in all things and everything. And so you see that idea of knowledge being inherent in that idea of the correspondence to Gemini. For tarot, I saw a number of different tarot correspondences. Personally, the one that I think goes best is the Hierophant, which stands for wisdom, endurance, persistence, patience, help from superiors, good advice, pretty much everything that Ansuz stands for. But there are some people who think that it goes more with death or the tower. I think those people are being overly pessimistic about this rune. As for the planet, I got, again, a lot of different opinions on what the planet for this is. Most people agree that it's Mercury, which is the one that I personally think goes with the best, because that one has to do with communication, as well as language, being intellectual, being very precise, and it's the exchange of ideas. Some of the other planets that have been suggested for this rune are Neptune and Venus. And to a certain extent I can see Neptune. I really don't see Venus at all. I guess if you want to think about it as Loki's rune, then I could see Venus, but it's Odin's more than Loki's, so I really don't see it. Its element is air, obviously, because it has to do with the mind. And actually, if we think about it in context of the runes that we've already talked about, we had our first two, which were Fehu and Uruz, which were both unconscious runes. And then we had Thurisaz, which was the subconscious, just like between the subconscious and the conscious, between the unconscious and the conscious. And then this one would be a conscious rune. And so it's very mind and intellect oriented, although it still has that correspondence to shamanism, prophecy, and various things like that, which could be considered to be more along the lines of unconscious thinking. And I guess that's why Neptune was thrown in there as one of the planets. As for stones, the ones that were suggested were emerald, which is considered to be a stone of prophecy, and bring reason and wisdom when you wear it. It's very thin that I see this association. And then lapis lazuli is another one that's been suggested. And apparently wearing a lapis lazuli ring can help you become a channel. It's for healers, and you can only use it as a healing stone if you have comprehension in the mind and wisdom in the soul, which I can kind of see, but again, it's kind of touch and go as far as that is. The best one that I saw was for tiger's eye, also known as cat's eye, falcon's eye, or hawk's eye. And if I remember correctly, Odin could transform into a hawk as his spirit or shape-shifting animal. So that kind of goes along with that, as well as it is a stone for the mind, not the body. It is used to focus the mind. And it makes one aware of one's own needs related to the needs of the others. You can also carve a personal symbol into tiger's eye, and it makes it's easier to use it in meditation. So I think that Hawkeye is probably the best choice for the stones suggested there. The tree that is usually associated with this rune is the ash, and the reason for that is ash is the world tree, or Yggdrasil. Again, I'm pronouncing that awfully. I'm terrible with these pronunciations. Which is ironic, because we're doing answer. And so I'm pretty sure that that's the main reason why ash is the tree used here. It has a lot of strong connotations with water, which is why it doesn't make too terribly much sense to me. But you can place the leaves under your pillow to produce prophetic dreams. The bark protects against magical charms. And this is one of the reasons why I'm okay with this tree being the tree that represents answer, is if you want your child to be a good singer, you take their first fingernail clippings and plant them underneath an ash tree, and it guarantees that they'll be a good singer. And song is one of those things that, song and poetry are the things that Odin rules over, so that makes sense to me. The plants associated with answer are fly agaric, or simply agaric, and morning glory. Fly agaric, I'm not entirely too certain how that happened. I guess it goes with this idea that many people believe that it was used in classical times with some of the mystery religions. And I suppose that goes along with the idea of the runes, because rune not only is the name for the symbols of the Futhark. These are all runes. These are all runes. But rune also means mystery. So I can see where that would come in. And then morning glory has to do with visions. Again, with the preventing of nightmares, just like the ash. It produces happiness when grown in the garden. And I constantly think of morning glories in with the idea of the druids, because druids would use morning glory in order to have visions. So I guess that would go. Both fly agaric and morning glory are horrifically poisonous. Morning glory only so if you eat it, so don't. And fly agaric is just poisonous in general, stay super away from it. Don't care what its magical properties are, don't touch it, it's really poisonous. And that's it for answer tonight. I'm taking a look over my wow, for answer being the rune for tonight, my brain is not working with words. I did want to point out a couple of my things from my collage. Here I've got a tree, and this is the tree of language. A lot of people visualize the different languages of the world as a tree, and I find that to be really interesting, because that's where Odin got his runes, on a tree. So I find that that works out rather nicely. And I did forget to mention Hugin and Munin, who are Odin's ravens, and they represent thought and memory, which are also powers of the mind, and so go into this idea of answer, or answers. That is it for tonight, unless anybody has anything to say.
No, I think we're okay.
No? Okay. Do you have anything to say, Alfred?
No, I think it's pretty concise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. I was concise tonight.
You were.
Alright, the only thing I have to say then, to conclude, is please call in and donate so that we can continue doing these wonderful study groups, and hopefully start a whole bunch of new ones so that we can continue sharing all this wonderful magical knowledge with everybody everywhere. Not only can you just call us in and donate to us, take a look at our other YouTube videos under the playlist of Telethon Donate, and you can call in and get any of the prizes there for your donations. So check it out, and see you guys next week, where we will do Rado next week. What's it be?